It's quiet. I had a song already for you guys and for everybody, but I just saw my daughter took my Spotify because she needed to listen to a story. But welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. It's good to see you all. In a way, my name is Sam Heath, and I'm here within the movement. So this is our webinar that we do each month, and our goal with this is to engage and elevate the voices of people in the justice movement, their voices and their work. So we hold here that mass incarceration isn't just a symptom, but it's not just a problem, that it is a symptom of something else, something that's a lot deeper. We as a society rely so much on punishment when harm happens. And rather than that, we want to call people to think about this ethos of restoration and mercy. And I keep going back to the scriptures and thinking of how the most often repeated scripture in the Bible is do not fear. And so we want to emphasize that and lean into how shalom isn't just an absence of evil, but it's this presence of well-being. And so I work for Equal Justice USA, and we're a national nonprofit working to end the death penalty and to help communities think about what does it look like to respond to harm without centering prosecution, police, and prisons. And my role with them is that I'm the manager of our evangelical network. And so I reach out to Christians, but especially evangelicals, about work that they're doing, justice work in their communities, and work to help them and equip them in that work. And so today we're going to be talking about mass incarceration, about punishment, about freedom. And we have two guests here today that I'm thrilled for you all to meet, Fox and Rob. And Fox and Rob friends, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, so glad that you all are here. So we'll talk for a bit and we'll save some time at the end for a Q&A. So anybody who's listening or watching, feel free to put in any thoughts or ideas into the chat or into the Q&A, and we'll save some time at the end for you all to ask some questions of Fox and Rob at the end. Let me give a little bit of context for what we're going to dive into. When we talk about mass incarceration, we're talking about our country. We're talking about the fact and the problem that we have nearly 2 million people who are locked up within this country. We can give lots of individual stats, but one that really stands out is there's 2,400 people that are on death row. We have hundreds and hundreds of jails. We have hundreds and hundreds of prisons throughout this country, nearly 1 million police officers. And we have a certain way of responding to harm within our society. And it is through control and through fear and through punishment. Now, Fox and Rob are from New Orleans and Louisiana, and some things to have us thinking about Louisiana. Louisiana is exceptional in a lot of great ways and a lot of tragic ways as well. If we're thinking about mass incarceration, there's 62 people on Louisiana's death row. One of them is a woman. And it's unique. A few other states have this, where on Louisiana's death row, you can choose as the person being executed, whether it's electrocution or lethal injection. There have been about 28 executions since the start of the modern era of the death penalty, which is 1976. And just for a frame of reference, that's a lot compared to other states. So Louisiana is also the land of Sister Helen Prejean, our favorite Catholic sister who has done much over many decades to engage the death penalty movement. And we'll talk about her. But one of the ways Louisiana is exceptional in a sad or tragic way is it's known as the world's prison capital. There's 1,100 people incarcerated per 100,000 people that are there, and that makes it the largest incarceration rate within the world. Now, Angola is there, or Louisiana State Penitentiary, and this is the largest maximum security prison within this country. There's about 5,000 individuals incarcerated there and over 1,000 staff that are there. And that specific space features in a lot of what we'll talk about today. So Fox and Rob, so thankful that you all are here. I want to talk about your lives, talk about the book, talk about the film, but let's start here. I mentioned Sister Helen Prejean, and she wrote the foreword for your book. So it's called Time, which is also the name of the documentary, the untold story of the love that held us together when incarceration kept us apart. She wrote in her foreword that you all were a couple that talked about how to live freely and love deeply. So start there, because so many of your conversations begin with you two as a joint one flesh entity. So what is this live free, love deeply thing that you two have going?
I think just on our journey, we have discovered that love is the most divine chemical in the universe, and it dissolves everything that is not of itself, Sam. And so when we understand that, God is love and love is God, then we understand that we have everything we need to really make it on this journey and live as fully functioning human beings on this planet Earth. And so I would have to pause for a minute and just say thank you. Thank you to Equal Justice USA for even creating this platform and putting a focus where I believe our strength is in this country, and that is in our faith-based community. So I am really honored to be here with you all, the evangelical component of Equal Justice USA, as well as those souls that have decided to join us today to hear this partake in this very important conversation. We don't take that lightly. So I think that through our journey, through our 21 years in the bloodiest prison in America, Angola, through our journey of 21 years of trying to maintain the institution of family at all costs, through my journey as a double parent. Some people call it being a single mother, but I call it being a double parent, because where my husband was not, I had to double up and fill in that space. Raising 6 boys in the prison capital of the world, when statistics say that when you have one parent incarcerated, that a child is 7 times more likely to end up in prison, him or herself. When you think about the fact that our children, our 6 sons, had both of their parents incarcerated, making them 14 times more likely to end up in prison themselves. And then to be able to say that, the praise report is, with God, all things are possible. Nothing is impossible with God. That we have 6 sons and all of them are living fully functioning lives. 5 have been to college. The 6th one is on his way to college this summer. None of them have been to prison. We have 2 marriages and no children born out of wedlock. When you think about the statistics of all of that, every barrier and statistic that is been set for us, through the love of God, our family has been able to overcome and to break those chains.
Yeah, it's so much to rejoice in. And in another sense, it's sad that we have to rejoice and have to know that this is, and what's happened with you all, and the glory and the goodness there is exceptional. Fox, I've quoted you with what you said before about love and it being a chemical that dissolves everything but itself. I said it to my wife a few weeks ago, and she looked at me like she knew it wasn't mine. I hadn't said it. I gave you credit though. I remember that from the book, and I've heard you say it before, but that's one of my favorite things that I've heard you say. Well, you all said it now, and I've heard you say it before. You speak of a collective that we were incarcerated for 21 years. Now, sometimes people say we are pregnant, and I understand that, but I also want to give all credit and glory due to my wife who had our 3 kids, and I say she was pregnant. But what's the goal, or what is it that you're capturing by saying we?
I think when you think about it in a broader scope, even when we think about as a person that has, say, perpetrated or committed a crime, there's the person that commits the crime, and then of course there's the person that is the victim, of the crime. With that being said, when we think about victims on more than one level, because not only do we have the victim who was the direct, person that was harmed, but our community is harmed. Not only is our community harmed, but, a broader sense. So we're talking about primary, secondary, and tertiary victims, that happen as a result of, crimes that take place, and they work in the same manner. When you're talking about a person that goes off to prison, not only does assuming that you're guilty of the crime, not only the person that you have offended has been harmed, but the community has been harmed, because you're now one person that has been removed from the community, who has resources, ideas, and things like that could be contributing factors to the community, but instead those things have been detracted from the community, much in the same way that Fox mentions being a double parent. You have a source of income now that has been removed from the household as a result of me being in prison. You have a disciplinarian that is now absent, from the family. You have a teacher that is no longer able to provide guidance and wisdom and things like that about good decision making and and all those other different types of things. So you're not the only person that goes away to prison. You're not, as far as the offender, you're not the only person offended. All of us are offended when, as a community of folk, when crimes take place in our towns, in our cities, and it's all the more reason why it is that we, as a collective, have to be engaged. We have to be involved.
Yeah. And we have to own it. So for us, using the word "we" reminds us that, one, we're not in this by ourselves, that this is a collective effort. It impacts all of us directly or indirectly, and leading the world in incarceration is no different. It is we are the largest incarcerator in the world, and it impacts all of us. The quality of life that we experience here in America, how much we are exposed to other crimes. All of those things matter when you talk about the we collective and the we mindset of what we have going on our watch as a country.
And Christians especially should be comfortable with that collective we, but so often we're not. There was an article in Christianity Today by Ron Schellenberg that talked about the contradiction of, within the church, when there's sin, we talk about mercy. Yet in society, when there's crime, we lean toward law and order. We think about this crime often as something that's done only against an individual, and then that person is removed and incarcerated and isolated, and we think that that's okay. Rather than, Christians have a call that when harm happens, as you all are saying, it's a we, it affects everyone. And if it affects everyone, then it's going to take a community to lean into it and heal that, which is the opposite of what our criminal legal system does.
Yes, we'll say it, Sam.
You all have a family motto. If it's not facing 297 years in prison, it's not a problem. So where does this number 297 come from?
297 years is the amount of time that we were actually facing for the offenses that we committed. One, armed robbery, at the time that we caught the crime, was 5 to 99 years for one count of armed robbery. In addition to, we shared information with members that had been impaneled on our jury, unbeknownst to us, thinking that we were trying to right or wrong, trying to share information that we thought that would be favorable to our situation, seeing as how we felt like we were being railroaded. We felt like certain information was being extracted and didacted from the jurors that were impaneled to hear the truth about our matter, because they were going to be the ones to render judgment. But with that being said, little did we know that in sharing that information, jury tampering, which is the charge in the state of Louisiana, actually carries the same amount of time as the crime that the jury has been impaneled to hear, unless the crime itself is life or death. If the crime is life or death, then the maximum that you face for committing a jury tampering offense is 99 years. So being that armed robbery was 5 to 99 years, 2 counts of jury tampering added to it. So now you're talking about 99 3 times, which equaled 297 years. So that is the time that our family, the sentencing exposure that we had been exposed to, subjected to through our choices.
Yeah. And first time offense. So this was exceptional for that sentence, also for a first time offense. I feel that's so key too. Well,
it was a first-time felony offense for both Rob and I and our nephew who was involved in the offense with us. And I just have to say, Sam, that until it happens to you, until it happened to me, being a college-educated woman, having my master's degree at the time of our family's tragedy, I thought that everybody that went through our criminal legal system got whatever time they deserved. I thought that our system was fair and impartial. As a person of color living in the deep South. I really did, until I sat in those courtrooms and I watched how deeply race and economics played a role in justice in our courtrooms. And as you were saying, just as Christians, we've got to understand that if God can forgive us, then certainly we have got to find ways to forgive our citizens when they transgress, so that we can create greater, we can reduce harm in the community, but that our answers are not law and order. And how do we know that? Because we've been trying it for the past 50 years and it hasn't made us any safer. It has only made us the largest incarcerator in the entire planet.
I feel we're talking numbers now, and it's a great time, Fox, to talk about your pearls and why those are important. And I know there's some number significance there.
Well, the very last gift that Rob gave me before he went away to prison was, before he was sentenced to prison, was for Mother's Day. He bought me a strand of pearls, and he says to me, even out of harm, God makes something beautiful, because the only way that a pearl can be made is when harm is caused to the oyster. And it just stuck with me and resonated with me. And so after watching the courts decide to give him a 60-year sentence as a first-time offender, a practical life sentence at the age of 28, he would have to do 51 years on that 60-year sentence before ever having an opportunity for parole, because of the Clinton crime bill, the Truth in Sentencing bill, which said he had to do 85% of his sentence if the offense was a violent offense. And so I would hold on to those pearls for, everything, to understand, Fox, out of this harm, God is going to create something good. And that is what is happening to us. So when Rob came home, I got a strand, my own strand made. It's called Fox Rich Pearls. They are 99 inches long to represent the 99-year sentence that we were facing. And so, I clutch them, I hold them, I roll them, they just are like my prayer pearls, so that when I'm thinking about those things that are challenges for us, I have to remind myself that out of harm, God creates something beautiful, Fox. And that is what has happened to our family. We experience a great amount of harm, harm that we caused ourselves with the decisions that we made as 6 months into our marriage. Our family is faltering as far as we can see, that we are literally barreling into the pits of hell in our first 6 months of marriage. And it reminds me, Sam, when Rob and I found out how much time we were facing, he says to me, well, Fox, we took vows for better or for worse. Did you think the better was going to come first? And I was like, well, hell yeah, I did. I did. Yeah,
that's what we hope.
10 good years and then all hell breaks loose, right, Sam? But not straight out the gate. And so for us, it's just about seeing that, out of all the harm that we created on our own, and then the harm that the state further exacerbated the situation and created and directed toward us, that still out of all of that, God has created something beautiful, because our family, until we go through something, we are not able to testify about God's goodness. And so now we are able to stand loud and proud and say, yeah, we fell short, but since our God is a forgiving God, since we're more than the worst thing that we have ever done, our God is able to restore us to our fullest selves, and then use us as an example to other people about what we need to be doing. I mean, no different than David, no different than turning Saul to Paul. This is not the first time that we have seen God use these stories of transformation for his greatest calling.
I think of Jesus saying of one of the women who came to visit him, that she loves much because she's been forgiven much. And that as we go through that need for forgiveness or that trial, it increases, one, our knowledge of our sinfulness and the greatness and knowledge that we have of God and his glory.
That's right.
I said once, Sam, that for me, it was about, I understand people that judge and they point the finger, and I say it's because they've never needed grace.
Yeah.
Until you've needed grace, then you really don't understand the importance of extending grace.
Yeah. You all have had a road, and there's a piece of it of the road to Angola, and then the road to the red carpet. So go to some of those more recent things, and what is that red carpet piece? And then there's the recent announcement with the Hollywood Reporter. So catch us up on all of that and that part of your story.
I think for me, Sam, it's always been probably one of the stories that resonated most with me during my period of incarceration was the story of Joseph. And, person that had been incarcerated for an extended period of time. And then subsequently, the tide turned, and before you knew it, he was granted an opportunity to, return. But in so doing, God had placed him only second in command to the leader of the land, to the king. And when you think about that, how it is that God will take you from, say, the lowest moment in life, he will take you from some of the greatest afflictions in life, as happened with Job. He can take you from some of the greatest atrocities in life, as what we were able to see happen through Paul. And as we look through those things, we also see the other end of those, which is the other extreme, and that is how it is that God will elevate you in stature, will elevate you in social status, and all those other types of things. So much so that our story, this little rinky-dink down in the dirty South, from the gates of Angola, the pits of Angola, that God saw this story fit to make it, as the Hollywood Reporter, the Hollywood report just recently, maybe about 2 weeks ago, said that this is one of the top 50 films of our century, that this story is one of the top 50 of this century. When you think about the fact that we were able to attend the 93rd Oscars, which was considered up to this point the most exclusive Oscars ever, because it fell right during the midst of COVID. So it was like only the who's were actually invited. So it was a really intimate and exclusive Oscar nonetheless. When you think about that, this story has received the Peabody Award for storytelling. When and the list just goes on and on and on as far as the accolades. That Time was considered the most honored documentary of 2020. So when you just think about all of those things, you don't pat yourself on the back, you don't thump your own chest or anything like that. You fall down on your knees and you thank God, who is the author and creator of all of what is made manifest from the story. So the book mentions a lot of different things. It mentions love, but right next to love, the book also mentions our faith walk through our 21 years of incarceration. And it was just one of those moments when Fox and I came to the realization early on that this was not about the judge. This was not about the DA. This was not about the Clinton crime bill. This was not about the offense that we created. This was an opportunity for God to show up and show out as God always does. And we were just obedient enough in the process to say that I will not give up. I will not turn my back on God. I will not curse him and move in another direction. Instead, I will embrace this moment and then shine inside of that moment. So when you think about the fact that, being in the nation's bloodiest penitentiary, I started looking at Angola as not the world's largest penitentiary or the world's largest prison, home to to more than 6,000 men when I was there, but started looking at Angola as a gated community. I started seeing that, just as we see inside of gated communities, we see people that look out after each other. We see people that speak good and speak up to their neighbors. We see people that hold each other accountable and those types of things. So we started doing much of the same inside of our prison, and we were able to turn things around to where, crazy enough, we would be inside of Angola prison. And I think we heard the words, "I love you," on an ongoing basis, when guys would come over to the table and greet our family when we would be in visitation with one another. So just a lot of those things that I saw turn around, but it had a lot to do with the fact that we just embraced this opportunity that God was giving us to be able to show that we could be better, that we could excel beyond what was maybe expected of us as offenders. And making it to the red carpet, putting the literary companion inside of Baker Books, the largest Christian publishing company in the country. But for this story to make it to those heights, just as a reflection of God's goodness and God's greatness.
Mm-hmm. I love how you tell the story in the book of how there's sections where Fox is speaking, there's sections where Rob is speaking, there's sections where both of you are speaking. It sometimes by the sentence it changes over and it feels like this conversation. One, I think that was a brave and risky way to do it, and it completely works. And anyone who's heard you speak or had a conversation with you, it comes out in that sense as well. So you get this insight into, and you get this feel and this vibe of how you two interact as a couple and writing the book that way. So what are some of the differences of emphasis that you wanted from the book to the documentary? I mean, I know just time-wise, there's such a shorter amount of time in the documentary and you have so much more space within the book, but what is it that you might have wanted to emphasize in the book that there was more space for, that the documentary didn't get to or as much?
The miracle, Sam. Miracles. People did not get a chance to see the miracles along our 21-year journey in the documentary. It's the documentary, which is on Amazon Prime for those that have joined us today that may want to take a look at it if they haven't already. The documentary is on Amazon Prime, and the book just really allowed us to flesh out the miracles that God had performed for us. You don't go from a practical life sentence in Louisiana's Deep South as a poor family of 8, it's 8 of us, and turn around and are able to reach your governor to get clemency out of over 2,000 applicants that had applied for clemency, which is the way that we were able to regain Rob's freedom. We were the only incarcerated family in 2018 that received clemency from our governor. And so that just speaks to the volumes of what kind of miracles God performed for us. So for us, it was just about really allowing people to see what is possible when we believe, when we trust God, even from the pits of hell, that God never leaves our side. God is always moving in our direction. Like the scripture says, all things work for the greatest good of those who love the Lord. And that's what we had to remember every time that a door was closed in our face, when another person that had an opportunity to see the injustice that had been done to our family hardened their heart and turned away from us, we were still able to scrape up enough girt and fortitude to say all things work for the good of those who love the Lord. And that's a challenge, but that is the kind of faith that we as Christians today have got to have in order to really be effective in doing the work of the one who has sent us while it is day.
And probably 2 other pieces, if I might add to it, Sam, is that we do a work probably 6 months after I got out of prison. We started a ministry, and one of the initiatives to the ministry is a participatory defense movement NOLA. We call it PDM Nola for short, but we teach legal awareness as a best form of defense to people that are justice involved. When you look at the documentary, as Fox made mention, it kind of gives you these broad strokes of how things took place. You kind of get a love and conviction kind of story that kind of is what's hashed out of the documentary. Whereas with the book, for those 2.3 million other people who we dedicated the book to, we were hopeful to be able to give them some helpful tools that they could put in their toolbox to navigate that system in order to reunite their families. And then lastly, the other thing that we were hopeful to demonstrate is that for people that are faced with whatever the afflictions, our affliction happened to be life behind bars. Someone else's problem or situation or circumstance may be addiction. It may be alcoholism. It may be loss of jobs. It could be health-related conditions. It could be a number of different things. But the thing is that what we were hopeful to demonstrate in the book that we didn't necessarily convey in the film is that no matter what it is that you're faced with, that as long as you never give up, you can overcome whatever challenges have been placed upon you.
You both used the term in the book, prison industrial complex. Why is that an important term rather than just prisons or prison system? Why specifically prison industrial complex?
Man, Sam, this thing has been, this monstrosity of a system has been so finely designed and engineered that it is a whole system, just like slavery. I mean, it wasn't just the slaves, the enslaved people that were being bought and sold in the country. It was the people that made money off the auction block. It was the people that made money for bringing the slaves from across the waters to this country. It was the people that made the money holding of the enslaved citizens until the enslaved people, until they made it to the auction block, those that fed them along the way. It's just so many systems. With this complex, it is a whole industrialized complex, from bailiffs to judges, to telephone systems, to 35 cents to send an email when the whole world is emailing and talking for free. It is the people that buy stock in these prisons that are for profit. It is the people that buy the labor, that get the labor for free, because the incarcerated are making goods for Victoria, for Victoria's Secret and so many of these other corporations out there that are taking advantage of slave labor. So it is a complex. It is not just a prison. But it's the people that make the money off the commissary that's sold to the poor families that are inside the prison working every day, and they make 4 cents an hour. My husband worked every day, 8 hours a day, and he made 4 cents an hour.
Yeah. It's wild. I read recently someone who was saying that maybe one way of interpreting when the New Testament says the powers and principalities is looking at some of our systems, like the prison industrial complex, and the degree and the scale and scope of evil that is there and that it represents. I mean, the book and the film and just your story, it's a pretty damning account of the system itself. And one thing that you all said in the book really struck me, and you had said that people never seem to consider the way the system of incarceration itself perpetuates recidivism. How does it do that? How is the system itself one of the chief offenders of recidivism?
Well, listen, think about this. If you've got children, if your baby goes to school and everybody at the school, say 75% of the people that attend the school get an F, the whole school, every parent in that community would be at that school raising pure decay about how is it that 75% of all these children are failing. So when you think about the fact that our system says about 66% of the people that are released from prison come right back, why are we not holding this system then accountable? Because it means that it failed to do the things required to be done to help people get reestablished and make their way and not come back. When you house, when I talk about this briefly in the book as well, but for me, being a college educated woman, always wanting to work and to do it and be better and build better. When I got to prison and I saw that there were 75 of us women locked in a dormitory, and the only thing that we left that room to do during the course of the day was to go and eat lunch 3 times a day. And if we were lucky enough, they would allow us to go outside for an hour of recreation. Other than that, these places are lock and feeds. They warehouse human beings all day long. And so you have people that are sentenced to 5 and 10 and 25 years in these lock and feeds. And then you dump them back out in society and you say, now go succeed. Don't come back. I've done nothing with you, no education program, no college degree, no training. I didn't even give you access to computer, to a cell phone, which is technology. And so to deny incarcerated folks access to technology when we live in a technologically advanced society is just like the slaves of old days when it was illegal to teach them. You could be killed if you were found to teach someone that was enslaved to read or write. So now from literacy, it is technology, and we are denying people behind bars access to technology that you can't even fill out a job application without going online. But when you're incarcerated, you have no, except for that 35 cent email, You have no access to a computer whatsoever.
Mhm.
And so that is then how it is ultimately driving the reincarceration of our citizens, because it thrives off the reincarceration of our citizens. Until we remove profit from prisons, punishment should not be for profit. That within itself should be a sin. It to Christian people that we should not be able to make a dollar off of the punishment, the suffering of other human beings.
Mhm. Mhm. You also say in the book that the system is functioning as it is designed to do. I mean, it's within the last couple of years that I've stopped saying that our criminal legal system is broken, because I'm not sure it is. And I mean, I'll speak more honestly. It for sure isn't. I think that it is functioning in the way that it was meant to, for the benefit of those it was meant to benefit, and for the harm of those it was meant to harm. And so by that measure, it's working, and it requires only our silence and our complicity for it to continue. And that cycle, that entity, that complex that you talked about will press on unless things come in to interrupt it.
That's right.
And that has to be systemic and individual too. I mean, Rob, I think about, you mentioned a moment when you were incarcerated that someone gave you a Bible, and that this was a significant moment of interrupting into some of the story. What was that moment, and why was that significant?
Well, it was just in that moment, as I may mention before, just the story of Joseph. It was through the introduction, when he gave me that Bible, it was that story that he shared with me. He told me, he said, you may not ever get through the end of this book, but if you just start from the beginning, I guarantee you by the time that you get through the first book of this Bible, I believe that something transformative will happen for you in that moment. And something did, in fact, transformative happen for me in the moment, because I identified with Joseph. Not only that, but it also it paved the way to what would then become 4 years of a seminary degree that I was able to acquire while I was in prison. It was one of a few programs that was offered to the men there in Angola. That was done through the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, where they offered both 2-year and 4-year degrees in Christian ministry and pastoral counseling, respectively. And so I was able to take those classes, and in taking the classes, just the classes that came in, the professors that came in, and the lessons and the things that they shared with us and taught us went a long way, even in moments where my relationship, my union with Fox was challenged. As people read and take up with the book, they'll realize that Fox and I were actually divorced through our 21-year journey. But it was through that period that we were going through that rocky road of our marriage that I fell into a class on love and family marriage and family counseling. I'm sorry. And the book that we were introduced to was a book by Gary Smalley, Making Love Last Forever. But in it just gave me a lot of valuable tools that I learned from that class and through seminary training that really helped me navigate my own marriage and bring our family back into the fullness or the wholeness of what it is that we were intended to be. And as they say, from that, the rest was history.
Or 26 years of marriage as of this past week.
That's right.
Wow. Wow. Well, you all talk a lot about love. You mentioned it several times. You mentioned it just now. Fox, you have your famous quote that I gave you credit for, of love dissolving everything that is not of itself. You also have an acronym for love. What is that, and how does that play a role in your family?
The acronym for love is the one that I share with people that had an opportunity to watch the documentary, and it is life's only valid expression. It just served so well for me over my tenure of incarceration, that anger was not, it may feel good in the moment or whatever, but it wasn't the answer. Violence wasn't the answer. So many other different things were not the answer. Love was the only valid thing that mattered. And through it, as Fox made mention earlier, that we know as Christian folks that love is God and God is love. So that means that they share equal powers, you know, when you think about the two. And if you can approach any situation, be it a situation of violence, be it a situation of disagreement or whatever it may be, that if you can at least lead with love, then I believe that you eventually get the outcome that you're hopeful to receive, because that's what love does. Love is not boastful, it's not proud, it's not violence. Love is not none of those things that are bad. Love is nothing but good, just like God. And when we employ it in our lives, that's what we get from it. We get nothing but good when we employ love.
You talk in the book some about the American dream, which is not love. It's this other thing. But it stood out to me when you wrote, the rhetoric of the American dream imposes an unrelenting optimism without consideration of the systemic factors that aren't equally distributed. And you all have talked about and shared some of your lives and how some of those factors were distributed for you all, and how you've lived in opposition to some of those things now, and how you've shown the goodness of God and how things have gone up to now within your life. I also think about, you quote Howard Zinn, and you say that he says, incarceration is a way of pretending to solve the problem of crime. There are a lot of systemic factors that are out in the world that lead to some of these things. And you all talked about also some of the individual choices, but how is it specifically that incarceration pretends or masquerades as a solution to crime?
It's probably more so just the fear mongering that we've done in society. Oh, lock them up. Oh, they were bad. Oh, you better lock them up. Throw away the key. They're no good anymore. I mean, even from going back to Hillary Clinton's super predator, referring to our children as super predators, not talking about the fact that the CIA had dumped crack cocaine into the Black community, and this massive chemically engineered epidemic had exploded in the Black community in front of everybody's eyes, and nobody knew how to deal with it, that left children abandoned and unparented because their parents were now addicts. You know, now that we have the opioid addiction, we have so much patience and consideration for how the opioid addiction and the fentanyl addiction is moving. Now we talk about treatment, but when it was the crack epidemic in the Black community, it was all about the criminalization thereof. And so we have to think about all of those elements that lead to our children and our people acting out. So if we can say, oh, lock them up, they have no value, throw away the key, that gives us the pretense that we have made it all better. When the truth be told, it's like putting a Band-Aid over a deep cut that you know you need stitches on. We continue to cut programming that support families, even to a point of saying that we want our people in our country to not be able to terminate a pregnancy, but nobody has said absolutely anything about supporting unwed mothers. It's like, where's the guaranteed monthly income for a woman who's bringing a child into the world that the father has said that he doesn't want, but there's nothing that she can do about it but bring forth this life? Where's the milk? Where's the daycare? Where are the diapers for that life to be sustained when it gets here? So I'm just hopeful that we will start moving from a solution-based, as people of God, being convicted to make our world better, that we move from a solution-based, getting ahead of it, and dealing with the issues on the front end. Talking about early childhood. We live in the most industrialized country in the whole wide world. Every child in our country should be in school by 3. All of our children, regardless of their income, should be able to have free health care, because it keeps single mothers, in particular in Black communities, able to work because their children are cared for. So we're constantly helping the economy rather than doing the reverse to the economy. But I think it goes back to one of those old sayings, Sam: people don't care what you know till they know you care. We got to
Mm,
show that we care about our people here
mhm,
in America. We got to show the love of God to one another, and that love of God will it will venerate through our laws that we pass.
mhm,
It will
mhm,
be reflected in our policies that we implement. The love of God, if that is who we say we are, then it should be reflected. The actions of the 10 commandments should be reflected in our policies.
mm. My youngest daughter, who took my Spotify so we couldn't listen to an opening song, her name is Wendell, and she's named Wendell after Wendell Berry, the author and essayist from Kentucky. And one of his famous books in 1970 was called The Hidden Wound. And his book was about the wound of racism. And that if you within this country, and that if you hide a wound and don't treat it, it festers and grows. And I think about you talking about putting a Band-Aid on something, and when that's not going to solve the problem unless you address those underlying issues. And we've named a lot of things. And I love, Fox, that you named and connected fear to all of this too. I think so much of our response to harm, or our response to violence, or our response to crime in this country is based off of fear, which is sad and horrible and ironic for Christians, especially because we should be people of great courage, people without fear, able to confront whatever it is and to put whatever piece of our identity on the altar to sacrifice it, because we know our identity, the core piece of it, doesn't change. But that fear holds us back as a country from so much.
That's right.
Makes me think about the 23rd Psalms. And I tell you, Sam, when you're taking on the whole state of Louisiana, just as an individual, no name recognition, no family status quo to glean from, no higher levels of education or connections to those in power to draw from, nothing but the sheer will and power of God to restore your family. That 23rd number of Psalms, it became my song, where I would have to remind myself that, I fear nothing because God is with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest the table for me in the presence of my enemies. So even those that are trying to keep this fear mongering going, these that feel like they benefit more that if we are divided than if we are united in God's love, that when we think about and say it over and over again, that 23rd Psalm, it has power for us to understand there is nothing to fear but fear itself. We are children of the Most High.
And it strikes me so much that in the 23rd Psalm, that table that's prepared is in the presence of the enemies. We're not necessarily removed. We're not necessarily delivered from being within the presence of those who are our enemies. There is still a proximity that's there, but yet there is still peace, despite all of these things that are going on around.
You better preach, Sam.
Well, it's all true. It's all true.
Right.
Listen, I want to pause a second and remind everybody listening, if you all have questions or thoughts or things you want to ask Fox and Rob or me, put those in the chat, put those in the Q&A, and I'll keep up with those and look at those as we continue to talk. My favorite line in your book is when you all say, the state wanted death and we wanted what God had promised us, life more abundantly.
Yes.
I mean, in that statement, I think it captures that arc that you've gone on from death to life. And that doesn't mean that the pain is removed and gone, right? That doesn't mean that the trials aren't there. You have 6 kids. I only have 3. Can't imagine the pain that is there and all of those things. But yet there's been this journey. There's been this arc. There's been the stillness amidst all of these other things. And at least that pressure and intensity and burden of the state has shifted and been removed. How does that phrase of life more abundantly resonate with you all now?
I think for me, every day, it just gets a little bit sweeter. Rob probably said it best when we were doing an interview for the release of the book. And somebody says, what are you doing now that you didn't think you could do any more of? And Rob's response was, after he said pensively, he says, love deeper.
Mm.
Didn't think that I had the capacity to love any deeper, but every day my capacity to love deepens, and I am amazed at it myself. And so for us, it has just been watching the love grow deeper.
Mhm.
And for somebody that Rob and I celebrated 26 years of marriage. And yes, for those that may be wondering, we did divorce, and I do count all my time because I never left his side. So you're going to give me mine. And but we have been in union with each other for this year will make 36 years, as we dated 10 years on and off before we married. And so when you are in the life of another human being for 36 years, it just, you would think that you know it all, you have it all, you've seen it all. But every day that he's home, last night when we went to bed, we went out and had a good time. And, you came home, you said, wow, I think I love you a little more, so I forgot your question, but that's what I landed on. What was the
That's
question?
great. That's great.
Yeah.
Just life abundant and what that looks like
Yeah.
now.
The
Yeah.
other piece of that would probably be too something that Fox made mention in the film, and it's her. She was maybe lamenting in the moment, and she said something to the effect of, "I want to have this situation behind me, and I want to live a life where I am so far removed from this situation, this circumstance, that I will
That I forgot
forget
how bad it hurt.
how bad it hurt."
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And when I look at the 20th of September this year will mark 5 years that I've been home since my release. And I swear that every year that passes by, it hurts a whole lot less.
Yes.
So much so that you kind of forget that it
How
even
bad.
happened, meaning not that the circumstance happened, but you forget how bad it pained you to endure it and go through it, because you find so much. One of the first books Fox sent me while I was in prison was a book by Viktor Frankl called Search for Meaning, and in it, it's something about when we find meaning in life, that pain seems to subside just a little bit more with each level of meaning or each depth
Purpose
of meaning that we draw from our struggles, our shortcomings. And when you again, Sam, when you were talking about some of the highs that we've experienced since coming home, I mean, it has just been one high road after another, since my return. And when you just look at those things, 6 months out of prison, I was teaching classes to the championship New England Patriots as a result of a class that I took while I was incarcerated from NFL great Jim Brown. Almost 20 years into the future, I meet his wife at a criminal justice reform summit that we were a part of in Hollywood, California. Just months after me coming home, and then within 6 months of coming home, here I am in the locker room with all of these new recruits that were now being welcomed into the NFL, and now they're sitting in this circle, and I'm actually sitting there teaching life skills, to these young athletes, and then it goes, like you said before, from that to the Oscars, from the Oscars to the book deal, from the book deal to being recognized as a top film of the century.
Till last week, he was at the U.S. Pardons Office being recognized as the only state clemency recipient as they were doing a second chances celebration of federal clemency recipients. They want to take time out and acknowledge Rob and I.
So to invite us up as special guests at a moment like that, it's just, just when you see all of those things unfold, when you see you wake up every morning and you're able to look into the eyes of your youngest child who wakes up, and he wakes up now with both parents. When you're even Fox and I get a real kick out of our son Freedom, who now works at our nation's capital. And he brings us up, and he wants to take us on a tour and introduce us to the people in the office where he works as the chief, the senior chief
operations director of operations for a congressman from North Carolina. But his favorite word is my parents.
You know,
Parents, oh,
so
my parents are here visiting me. They're
right.
having lunch with me at the Capitol today. So
Or our other sons who we may go off and go visit them. And then, you know, when you hear them talking to their friends over the phone and say, well, you know, my parents are here from out of town, you know, so it's not just my mom is here. It's not just, you know, but now a collective, and that is reflective of, again, just how over space and time that it hurts just a little bit less.
and then I think too, the work that we do since we have been home. Rob, I don't know why he always says it's 6 months, but 2 months after Rob came home, we launched Rich Family Ministries. And then 6 months after his return, we started our initiative, which is Participatory Defense Movement NOLA. And so in the midst of putting our own lives together, God, you know, what we understood when Rob walked out of that gate was to be free is to free others. And so we had a duty and an obligation to do for other folks what God had done for us. And so knowing that nothing but God could have freed us from the trenches of Louisiana's criminal justice system, we have been intentional about helping other families navigate, to create strategies to reduce harm, to restore families, to build bridges between the offenders and the offended. And to date, we judge our success by how much time we save someone from going to prison and serving in prison to how much time they actually serve. And so today we have saved 3,300 years of time from behind bars with the work that we do. This month we celebrated 4 years as with this initiative, PDM Nola, and so that within itself, in the midst of healing yourself, you're able to create more healing around you by just continuing to do God's work, you know.
I think about James Baldwin saying, in reference to a black-white dynamic, but our freedom is tied up with their freedom. But I mean, it applies of what you're saying, of there being this mutuality of we all cannot be free until our brother and sister, our neighbors are.
That's right.
There are 2 questions that came up, and then I want to end with asking you all how people can keep up with your work and what all is going on. So the first one I can answer, I mentioned at the beginning, the modern era of the death penalty, and someone was asking, what does that mean that started in 1976? And in the early 70s, the Supreme Court ruled the death penalty that it was cruel and unusual punishment. And there was a hiatus for a portion of the 70s, and it was brought back in 1976. And then the first execution of the modern era of the death penalty was in 1977. And we've had hundreds since that time, continuing up until incredibly recently. And there've been 190 exonerations since then that we've had since 1976, but that's referred to as the modern era of the death penalty. And that's one way of looking at this complex, this system. But the last question, if you can answer it quickly for you two, is someone was asking about, if you want to share that, it's all right. And if not, your specific denomination that you're in, but mostly they're wanting to get at, what's a way that your faith animates your work or fuels your work or motivates you?
Fox and I both identify as Christians, and our work is probably most identified by the Great Commission, and that is to create disciples. And that is our work. We go out every day working to build disciples.
Other people willing to do God's work.
That's right.
Yeah, I love it. So I'll end here. One, want to invite everybody back next month. So next Thursday on May 25th at 2 p.m. Eastern is the next In the Movement webinar. I put the registration link in the chat, but I mention it because I don't know if I even told you this, Fox and Rob. It's with our mutual friend, Jami Hodge, who is the executive director of Equal Justice USA, the group that I work with. So she's going to come next month and share some of her story about her tragedy and her trauma, the hope that she has, and about how she moved on this road from prosecutor to now the work that she does, of also thinking that the freedom of everyone is tied up with everyone else's freedom. So would love to see everybody who's here come back. I'll email you all, if you're on this, a recording of this, as well as any of the links that we mentioned. But Fox and Rob, how can people keep up with you and your work and know whatever link or thing that you want to mention, I'll send everybody. But how can people keep up with what you're doing?
Yeah, we are Fox and Rob on all social media, as well as foxandrob.com is our website. Our ministry is richfamilyministries.org, and our initiative, Participatory Defense, is pdmnola.org. So Participatory Defense Movement NOLA is pdmnola.org, and those are the ways that they can keep up with us. Our contact information is there. Would love to be able to come and share with other members in their congregation. So we look forward to hearing from you all, and thank you for being here. Thank you for being concerned about this work and being present for it.
And that is FOXANDROB, Fox and Rob.
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll send it out to everyone. Well, friends, thank you so much for coming, for sharing of your story, the triumphs, the trauma, all of these things. I know that it costs you something to share that each time. So I'm really grateful. I know you've inspired and challenged a lot of people here and in so many places. So thank you so much, friends, for coming and sharing.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank
Thank you
y'all
for
for
having
having
us,
us.
Sam. Yes.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. And hopefully we'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Mhm.